The hush landed in the dining room like a velvet hammer. It wasn't loud, but it rearranged the air, turned it into attention, brittle and bright. 3 seconds later, the man who caused it smiled the way men smile when they assume the world is a well-trained dog. He arrived without fanfare that still read as fanfare. Not a red carpet, but the low thrum of recognition that moved table by table like a ripple underwater. His name was Victor Hallett, a man whose portfolio stretched across American cities like a net, catching apartment complexes and logistics warehouses, a sliver of a baseball team, and a bigger sliver of a regional power grid. He was 52, the kind of salt and pepper that looked expensive rather than older, the kind of tan that suggested private golf rather than sun. He didn't so much cross the threshold of hearth and harbor as claim it with the ease of muscle memory, loafers soundless on the herringbone wood, jacket open to declare an unassailable chest, a watch face that glanced the light and scattered it into the eyes of the nearest 6 tables. He didn't check in at the host stand. He turned to glance over the dining room, the chandeliers like captured starlight, the huge painting of a single ship at sea, then kept walking. Grace Ellison was behind the server station, rolling silverware and linen napkins with the speed and grace of a card dealer. 28, hair in a practical twist to keep it out of the heat lamps and the bears of the pass. She had the posture of someone who could be hit by a wave of 100 small needs and keep her footing. The night already hummed at a frequency that meant careful triage. A 6-top that wanted the oysters refired, not because they were under, but because they were unhappy people. A man at table 12, whose date had ordered a salad and then panicked in the face of croutons. 2 kids who wanted a Shirley Temple, but only if the cherry was precisely at the bottom, like a secret, and not on top, like a trophy. "Corner," she called softly, sliding past Marcos at the bread station, and stepped into the aisle just as Victor reached the host stand and offered it a smile like a business card. "Mr. Hallett," the host said, already standing a little straighter. "Good evening." "Good evening," Victor said, as if they both worked for him. "I'll take the window, the corner one." The corner table wasn't available. It wasn't even theoretically available. A couple in their 60s had stretched their courses until the crème brûlée became geologic time, and they were now leaning toward one another in soft, private laughter, hands nearly touching in a way that revealed 40 years of practice. Even if the table were available, the corner table required the corner policy. No walk-ins, no exceptions, which was one of those rules that separated a place with standards from a place with a price. "Of course," the host said gently, which is the word hosts say when they need to locate a higher power and negotiate. "We're honored to have you. If you'll give us just a moment, we—" Victor didn't give moments. He lifted his chin toward the corner. His smile didn't move, but it showed teeth that didn't need to, but could. "It won't take long," he said. "Just ask them to wrap up." Grace was already moving. She stepped into the host's line of sight, placed a hand on the reservation book as if it were a living thing. "Hello, sir," she said to Victor. "I'm Grace. I'll take excellent care of you. We have a beautiful table free now, window by the oaks. If you'd like the corner, I can put a hold on it for your next visit. Tonight, that table stays with the couple that sat down for it, down for her." Her tone was not defiant. It was the superior tool. Clear, warm, very hard to argue with, because it didn't sound like an argument. She didn't look at the watch. She didn't look at the couple. She kept her eyes on his, steady. Not a challenge, but a mirror, offering him the opportunity to see himself and choose a better version. Victor glanced at her, then at the couple, then back at her. For one small flicker of an instant, his face was blank. Blank faces are where truth lives. Then he applied a layer, a laugh that arrived as if a friend had texted him something outrageous. "Is that so?" he said. "I fund your landlord." At another table, a knife met a plate too hard. The sound rang across the room like a dropped coin. "Congratulations," Grace said, and somehow the word contained no sarcasm, and yet was not a compliment. "Follow me, please." Mini reveal number 1 arrived not with a drum roll, but a detail. As she turned, the tiny brass key on a slim black lanyard around her neck flashed in the light. Old hotel key style, stamped with the number 17. It caught Victor's eye, snagged there for reasons he couldn't have named. Keys mean ownership. Keys mean jurisdiction. Keys mean someone else has a door you can't open. Grace led him to the window by the live oaks, their leaves black against the deep blue of the early evening, and set down a fresh menu. The room resumed its breathing. She poured water from a chilled carafe that beaded with condensation, laid a napkin with the crisp flip that is part flourish, part ritual. The confidence in her movements was not theatrical. It was arithmetic. 100 nights had become skill. Skill had become ease. "Something from the bar while you look?" she asked. He looked up at her, held the gaze a fraction too long. The professional woman's measurement of how long is a fraction. Too long is a kind of algebra they teach themselves with their bodies, and smiled again. "Let's just start a tab," he said, a phrase that excused him from the world and placed him in a private economy where time and credit were fluff and the rest of the room was an audience. "Keep it open." "We close tabs once a guest orders," Grace said. "It keeps the back end clean." "Keep it open," he repeated, more gently, because he knew how to make a request sound like a favor he was giving you. "You'll have my card on file." "We process cards at the end," she said. "House policy." She knew what would come next. She'd heard it every night. The room contained certain men and certain watches. He didn't disappoint. "House policy," he said, as if tasting something he might or might not swallow. "I own the house 2 blocks down. Do you know who I am?" Grace didn't glance at the host, because she knew the host would be watching to take his cues from the weather she created. She didn't tilt her head toward the manager, because the manager would appear if summoned. She simply said, "You're a guest." And the physics of the room reshaped around that simple noun. "And I'm going to treat you exactly as we treat all our guests, because that's what makes this place fair." He had a dozen moves. He selected the one that had always worked since he was 30, and learned that money could be laundered into charm. He softened. "Fair," he said. "I like that. Fine. Bring me your best dry martini, blue cheese olives, and the scallops to start." "Martini up, blue cheese olives," Grace said, jotting, though she did not need a note for an order this simple. "Scallops. And for your main?" He skimmed the menu as if it existed to confirm his taste. "Bone-in ribeye, medium rare. If the chef does it true medium rare, not chef medium rare, where they take the temperature of a candle." A smile touched the corner of her mouth, the agreed-upon language of a person who understands the difference. "I'll make sure," she said. As she pivoted away, he said, not unkindly, "And make sure it's on time. I have a thing." "We all do," she said softly, and not to him. Mini reveal number 2 arrived behind the bar, where Iris, the bartender with tattooed ivy curling up her wrist, slid Grace the martini glass shimmering with frost. Grace's eyes cut briefly toward the security camera that had been installed over the bottle shelf exactly 9 days ago. Most guests never notice the camera above the top shelf of liquor. Those who do assume it watches the bar staff's pours. But Grace had noticed the power cord snaking behind the woodwork into the manager's office, where it connected to a black box with a slot for a micro SD card. The camera pointed not at the staff's hands, but at the tips jar and the check presenters as they returned to the well. "Blue cheese olives," Iris said, with a conspirator's smile. 2, not 3, because the gods punish greed. Grace pressed the olives onto the pick, a tidy little trio threading the line between want and restraint. "Table 18, she said. "He's already measuring the room." "Which he thinks he owns," Iris said. "Which he doesn't," Grace said, and smoothed her apron. At the pass, she lifted the scallops. They wore a caramelized crown that announced attention had been paid. The lemon beurre blanc gleamed like a promise. She placed plate and martini with precision that turned the act into respect, and stepped back. Victor took the stem in hand and didn't drink. Not yet. "What's that key?" he asked, eyes on the small brass 17 resting against the black of her shirt. "A reminder," she said. "Of what?" "That there's always a door someone else can open." He laughed, genuinely pleased. "That's either Zen or customer service trauma. I can't tell which." "Maybe both," she said, and let him have the line as if to say, "You can have jokes. You can't have policies." The first conflict arrived disguised as nothing. A check presenter, returning from table 7, the one with the oysters. Grace slid it open to reconcile a habit as ingrained as hand-washing, and found the surcharge. It was small, printed in faint gray. Card processing fee, 3.95%, 3.72. She went still in that particular way that looks like efficiency if you don't know what to look for. Then she closed the book, breathed, and slipped it into the stack that would move back to the manager's office with the others. The law, she knew, allows certain surcharges in certain states, but only if they are disclosed clearly at the point of sale, not hidden like a footnote. More than that, Hearth and Harbor's owner had stated in the pre-shift meeting, firm, that they would not pass card fees to guests. It was part branding, part decency, part understanding of how $3.72 becomes $372 across 100 tables. If it was on a receipt, someone had put it there. And it wasn't the POS island industries. Like restaurants, live or die by their text quirks, and this receipt's font was different. It looked inserted. Catalyst number 1 was as small as the gray letters and as loud as a fire bell in Grace's memory. 2 nights ago, she had counted her tips and found the math wrong by pennies that turned into dollars, that turned into a shrug she was supposed to accept. Last week, Marcos had been shorted an hour on his schedule, then asked to clock out early, and stay to fold napkins because the labor budget needed to look cleaner on paper. Little things accumulate until they are not little. 1,000 thin cuts is still a wound. "Need a runner?" called Chef from the pass, and the room's rhythms pulled at her sleeve. Grace moved. That is what professionals do. Move and think while moving. Victor ate with the concentration of a man who regards food as fuel and status in equal measure. His attention, though, flicked outward when the couple in the corner laughed again, when a busser dropped a spoon, when the manager, Bryce, drifted through the room with his tablet like a bishop blessing rows of faithful. Bryce was 36, with the body of a former college athlete and the face of a man trying to beat time in the free weights section. He had the particular charisma of someone who has read 2 books on leadership and decided he is both. "Grace," Bryce murmured when she passed him in the aisle, a tone threaded with the kind of warning that is suggestion by other means. "That's Hallett. Make it silky." "Silky?" she said, not looking at him. "Silky. He's comp adjacent. I'll handle the bill. House policy is we treat all guests the same," she said, which sounded like she was repeating a thing he had said in orientation, because she was. "We'll charge him like everyone else." "We'll see," Bryce said, and smiled the smile that asks you to be loyal to a person instead of the principles the person is paid to uphold. Mini reveal number 3 arrived in the form of a text that lit Grace's phone. A text from a number saved under only a period. It was a picture of a receipt, taken on a different night, with the same faint gray surcharge, printed like an afterthought. Underneath the image, "You seeing this, too?" The sender was a barback from another restaurant in their small local group. A kid with 2 jobs and a college class in between. Someone whose English had more courage than grammar, and whose ethics had more muscle than either. Grace slipped the phone back into her apron, the brass key tapping the case like a metronome. She didn't look toward the camera over the bar, because that's how you tell a camera you know it's watching. "Another martini?" she asked Victor when she saw his glass half empty, but knew his appetite for being seen might prefer the visible ritual of the refill to the invisible one of simple speed. "Look at you, reading minds," he said. "Yes, and go ahead and put in the steak." She nodded, slid away. In the kitchen, the air was salt and heat, the steak station a map of fire and iron. She relayed the order precisely, confirmed the temp, watched the chef's eyes track the ticket. When the rib eye hit the cast iron, the sizzle sounded like a decision being made. On her way back toward the bar, she stopped at table 3 because the woman's shoulders telegraphed the specific collapse of someone whose blood sugar was about to drop below a decent threshold. She placed down a plate of bread, as if it had been ordered, and left with a whisper, "On me." That felt like a secret handshake between humans. At the bar, Iris said, "You see Bryce and his iPad? He took 3 books into the office 10 minutes ago and came out with 2. "Receipt books?" Grace asked. "Yep." "Which ones?" "The ones from last Thursday and Sunday," Iris said, and her mouth tightened. Guess which nights had the big corporate tables. Mini reveal number 4 was the oldest story retold with modern tools. Skim a little, call it a system fix, move lines around until they look like columns that balance. If you skim from those who cannot afford to notice you are skimming, you can call it optimization and sleep like a child. If someone notices, you call it a misunderstanding and return the money with a sigh at the inconvenience. The trick is not to get caught. The trickier trick is to make those around you believe catching you would be bad for all of them. Grace slid the fresh martini onto Victor's table. He didn't thank her with words. He thanked her with the kind of eye contact that contains a tip in it, a promise that generosity will follow fealty. She didn't accept the promise because she served tips, not gods. "What do you think this room costs per minute?" he asked, lifting the glass. "More than the bread service," she said. He laughed. "2,000 a minute," he said, as if telling her a secret that would make her feel included instead of kept out. "Between overhead, staff, rent, 2,000 a minute. When I walk in, if you put me in a seat faster than anyone else, I can save you real money. Or you can wait your turn like everyone else," she said, not gently, but not unkindly either. "Which is cheaper in the long run." He studied her. "You don't scare." "I schedule my fear for Sunday nights," she said. "That's my laundry time. It multitasks." He smiled at that, the weird, sideways delight some men take when a woman declines to perform deferent gratitude. "You're wasted here," he said. "I'm paid here," she said, "and I like to finish what I start." The ribeye arrived at a perfect medium rare, warm, red center that bled only humility, crust like a verdict, butter, basting herbs that perfumed the air so that 3 nearby tables considered ordering the same, and 2 actually did. "Knife," he said, not because the knife wasn't there, but to see how quickly the world would produce what he had not asked for properly. She set the steak knife on the table, as if placing a chess piece. "The bill will be printed like everyone else's," she said quietly, as if they were discussing the weather, not the rule that mattered. "There won't be a surcharge. There won't be a comp. There will be a number and a place to sign." He cut into the steak, tasted, and conceded with the smallest lift of his eyebrows that the kitchen had not lied. "We'll see," he repeated the manager's phrase, as though the world were a thing that waited around to learn what he wanted of it. Back at the server station, Grace lifted the stack of check presenters bound for the office and paused long enough to pull the ones with the faint gray surcharge into a separate pile. It wasn't all of them. It was enough. She slid the stack under the drawer where the spare pens lived. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Bryce look over, eyes doing math he pretended he didn't do. "What are you doing?" he asked, casual blooming into something else. "Pre-reconciling," she said. "It makes close smoother." "Just send them in," he said. "I'll take care of it." "We'll do it by the book," she said, and the brass key at her neck lay heavy, as if some small gravity had shifted. He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne asserting itself as if that were proof of adultness. "Grace," he said, undertone loaded, "you're a star here. Don't make this a thing. Hallett's ours. The rule is we adapt." "The rule is fairness," she said. "Or else it's favoritism. And favoritism grows mold." Something in his expression closed. There was a click to it, like a door not slamming, but shutting with intent. "You ever think that generosity is the grease that makes the world spin?" he asked. "Only when the grease stains the ledger," she said. He smiled, thin. "You won't last in this business if you make it moral." She smiled back, the kind of smile you give a child when you remove a knife from their hand. "Watch me." She left him there to consider the smallness of a person who talks in large ideas about generosity while palming coins from the jar. When the time came to print Victor's check, Bryce drifted toward the computer like fog. Grace got there first. Fingers quick, she pulled up the table, verified the items, tapped the button that would send the check to the little thermal printer. The receipt slipped out with its odd mitt of finality and cheer, the paper curling like a ribbon. She read it. No surcharge. She printed a duplicate because the future likes an extra copy. She walked it to Victor with the nonchalance of a person delivering a fortune cookie. He didn't reach for it. Men like him rarely reach for bills. They allow the world to carry such things to the place where their pens live. He waited. She waited with him. A perfectly normal, perfectly human silence took on weight. The tablecloth breathed under the air conditioning vent. "Ah," he said after a beat, and took the book, and opened it, and took out the black card that meant nothing to machines, because machines only recognize numbers and limits. He placed it in the folder and offered it back, but she did not take it. She looked, unmistakably, at the line on the receipt that said, "Gratuity not included." "We run the card after you sign," she said, as if stating a natural law. "The new policy is signatures before swipes. The machine will prompt you. It helps with our end-of-night reconciliation." He cocked his head. "You don't trust me to sign after?" "We trust everyone to do what they like," she said. "The policy keeps it fair. What if I don't sign?" "Then I void the check and call the police," she said. And it was so serene, so matter-of-fact, that he laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was true. And he enjoyed bravado, even when it wasn't his. He signed. He signed because the truth is, no man wants to be the one who finds out the police will be called over a ribeye. And because the small point had already been made larger than it needed to be by the audience he'd summoned with his entrance, he signed with a tip that was generous enough to perform decency without purchasing it. He slid the book back, a little flourish he probably didn't notice he'd learned at 20, and she took it like routine, because it was. Mini reveal number 5 didn't look like a reveal until it was one. When she ran the card, the POS prompted a message that had appeared 3 nights ago, and that she had noted with a mental index card. Cash discount mode. On. It was a software setting some owners use to offer a lower price for cash payers and a higher one for card payers without calling the higher price a surcharge. The problem? The printed menu listed only one price. There was no signage. The manager had said they were testing market sensitivity. The law called it something less pretty. She tapped override, entered the code the owner had given the staff for in case a guest asks, and the screen vanished like a rabbit slipping into the grass. But the audit log, she knew, would keep the attempt. She returned the card, the receipt, the pen. His eyes flicked to the tip line already inked with the number he'd decided proved who he was. She tucked the merchant copy into the slot for later, but not into the usual holder. She slid it, folded, into the slim notebook she carried in her apron pocket, the one with the embossed gold star on the cover, the one she'd bought at the drugstore because the paper was thicker than it needed to be and would hold staples without ripping. "Pleasure," he said, rising, and the word had the cadence of a closing argument. He'd eaten well. He'd performed wealth. The world had been reminded. "The pleasure is the point," she said. "Good night." He turned as if to say something else, something pithy, something that would turn the moment into a story he could tell that made him the hero. But the couple in the corner stood at the same time, and the room's attention shifted to them in that warm, village way rooms can have when they decide who matters. He went out under the painting of the ship at sea. Grace gathered the presenters, slid them into their bins, and when she could, she slipped into the alley behind the restaurant for 30 seconds of air, not saturated with butter. The night smelled like rain that hadn't committed yet, and trash day tomorrow. She took out her phone and snapped a photo of the receipts with the faint gray surcharge. The camera sharpening algorithm did its best because modern software tends to believe the truth wants to be seen. The brass key lay against her sternum, warm with her skin. She turned it in her fingers, a habit that didn't have a beginning, only a middle, then nested it back under her shirt. It had belonged to her mother, who had kept it on a string in their kitchen in Ohio, and said, when the world got loud, "This opens the only door that matters." The key had, in fact, opened room 17, in a motel where her mother had once cleaned 12 rooms in a day because a convention had arrived unannounced. It also opened, in Grace's mind, the idea that doors exist for reasons, that entry is not ownership, that being invited into a room does not mean you own the room, even if you think you do. She went back in. The room hummed. The floor needed her. When closing came, it came like always. The soft exhaustion, the mathematics, the ritual of wiping things down so that tomorrow begins as if tonight did not happen. Bryce took the check presenters into his office with a cheerful, "I'll do the deposit. You all go home," which meant, "I will be the last pair of hands on the money." Iris caught Grace's eye and shrugged an apology for a thing that wasn't hers to fix. Marcos stretched his back and said, "My cousin says the place on Maple pays cash. Maybe we should all go there and become rumors that make him nervous." Grace smiled and said nothing. She waited until the others had clocked out, and until Bryce had disappeared into his office, and until the quiet in the dining room was the pure kind of quiet a space makes when it is between purposes. Then she crossed to the security camera over the bar and looked at it. Just for a second. Not a challenge. A check-in. She lifted her phone. She opened the photos. She selected the gray surcharge shots and the merchant copy of Victor Hallett's receipt with the cash discount mode glitch timestamp. She attached them to an email that already existed as a draft. The subject line read, "Pattern, not error." The recipient was a city email with a name she had spoken to once on a recorded line about a different place and a different manager, and a line that had become a number in a budget that bent the wrong way. Before she hit send, she added a sentence. "I'm not asking you to punish anyone. I'm asking you to level the room." She hovered. She did not send. Not yet. Decisions made too fast can be dismissed as emotion. Decisions made after you sleep read as intent. On her way out, she passed the painting of the ship and paused because mini reveal number 6 lives where you least expect it. In the lower right corner of the frame, tucked between wood and canvas, a slim triangle of paper. Someone had slipped a note there as if it were a chapel, and this were a prayer. She teased it out. The paper was torn from a server pad. On it, neat block letters. 17. Underneath, in a quick scrawl. Back door. Tomorrow. Noon. No signature. Grace looked at the brass key around her neck. She looked at the number on the note. She felt the lightest little tilt of the universe, the way you feel when you step onto a boat, and remember, the world moves, even when you stand still. "Okay," she said quietly, to the empty room, which had heard worse and kept confidences better than most people. Out on the street, Victor slid into the back of a car that was not a yellow cab and not a limo. The kind of SUV that shuttles people who never need to think about parallel parking. He was smiling at his phone. A message thread with a contact labeled BK, H plus and A, blinked at the top. All good? Comped? Victor typed. Paid like everyone else. Then, after a beat, because he liked to turn the knife, he added, and the waitress enjoyed it. He didn't hit send. He deleted. Enjoyed. He typed. Insisted. He hit send. The word choice pleased him less, but it would play better if the thread ever got screenshotted. He leaned back and closed his eyes because he had a thing in the morning and a call after that, and then a meeting in a conference room where the table cost more than most cars. As he hovered at the threshold of sleep, the image that rose was not the ribeye or the window or his own reflection. It was the small brass key at a woman's throat. It annoyed him that he could not stop thinking about it. Men like him do not like being handed symbols they cannot interpret. The morning arrived blunt and bright, the way New York insists on waking people who went to bed with questions. Grace lay in the small studio apartment she rented above a laundromat. The ceiling cracked faintly like a map. The walls painted a color someone in marketing had once called eggshell whisper. She had the note tucked inside her notebook, pressed flat against a page with scribbled numbers and receipt photos. The brass key still hung at her chest, weightier now, as if it had absorbed intent overnight. She had not slept much. Sleep requires surrender, and surrender felt impossible when she had evidence that the manager she worked for was slipping surcharges into checks, and possibly worse. The 17 on the note felt like a signal, not coincidence. A breadcrumb left for her to find. But by who? No one left notes like that, unless they wanted to be caught, or unless they wanted someone else to share the burden of knowing. By 11:30 a.m., she was walking down the alley behind Hearth and Harbor. The dumpsters smelled of last night's shellfish, and the bricks sweated with humidity. Noon felt like a deadline carved into the air. She kept her phone in her back pocket, recording audio without looking like she was recording audio. Old habit. Her mother had once told her, record the world when you think the world might lie. At 12:01, the back door opened with a groan of tired hinges. A man stepped out. Not Bryce, not Iris, not anyone she recognized from the dining floor. He wore a baseball cap low, jeans, a faded hoodie with the sleeves shoved to the elbows. His hands were quick nervous, calloused. He looked up and down the alley before his eyes landed on her. "Your Grace?" he asked. "I am," she said, even though every instinct screamed to deny. He pulled from his hoodie pocket a thin stack of paper folded twice. He held it the way people hold live things, gingerly, as if it might bite. "I can't keep this anymore. They'll find out." "What is it?" she asked, though she had a good idea already. "Ledger prints," he said. "Night deposits, last 3 months. Look at the signatures. His voice cracked. They're not the owners. They're Bryce's. He's been running comps to people like Hallett, and then adding fake surcharges to the rest of us to balance. Skimming. Thousands. Grace reached, careful, and took the stack. The numbers leapt off the page. Clear handwriting. Dates aligned with nights she remembered. The corporate tables. The private parties. The exact evenings where receipts had looked wrong. Each sheet was stapled to a bank deposit slip. Each slip showed totals that didn't match her memory. "Why me?" she asked, folding the stack once, sliding it into her notebook with the note and the photos. "Because you don't scare," he said simply, "and because you wear the key. People notice that. They think you've got doors." Before she could reply, the back door creaked again. The man swore under his breath, shoved his cap lower, and vanished down the alley, shoes slapping pavement. Bryce stepped out into the sun, tablet in hand, sunglasses reflecting everything but himself. "Well," Bryce said, "you're early." His smile didn't reach his voice. "And alone. Not wise." Grace tucked the notebook deeper into her apron, though she wasn't on shift yet. She folded her arms. Sometimes being early is the only way to see what's really happening. Bryce tilted his head. "You don't understand the way this place works. You think fairness pays rent? You think rules keep the lights on? Men like Hallett think they own the room," she cut in. "But they don't. Not while I'm serving." The words hung between them, heavier than they should have been. For a fraction of a second, Bryce's face slipped, the mask thinning. Then he clapped the tablet closed, too hard. "Clock in tonight," he said, "and remember who signs the checks." That night, the dining room shimmered again with wealth. Victor Hallett returned. He wore a different jacket, a sharper grin, but the same aura, the sense that walls bent toward him, that people arranged themselves to flatter the angles of his life. Bryce greeted him personally at the door this time. Handshakes too firm, laughter too loud. Grace watched from the server station, the ledger pages heavy in her pocket. Victor clocked her presence instantly. His eyes lingered not on her face, but on the brass key again, that annoying, unclaimed symbol. He raised his glass in a mock toast across the room. She did not raise hers back. When she approached his table with water, he leaned in. "You again?" he said, pleased. "The one who makes millionaires pay." "The one who treats everyone the same," she corrected. He laughed, low, rich, practiced. "Tell me, Grace, what's fairness worth in dollars? Because I assure you, men like me set the price." "Then maybe men like you should learn to pay it," she said softly, setting down his drink. His eyebrows rose, just a flicker, but it was enough. Enough to register that she was not furniture, not background, that she would not bend even when the manager hovered like a storm cloud 3 steps behind. Mini reveal number 7 happened an hour later, mid-service, when the couple at table 9 complained their card was charged twice. They showed her the printout on their banking app. 2 pending charges, same amount, same timestamp. Grace checked the receipt. 1 charge. She looked at Bryce across the room. He was tapping on his tablet, smile fixed in place. She excused herself, went to the office when he stepped out for a call, and opened the black box wired to the camera. The micro SD card slid free in her hand. She slipped it into her notebook with the ledger papers. Her pulse thudded so loudly she worried the walls could hear. On the footage, she knew, would be proof. Receipts swapped, signatures forged, surcharges inserted. A pattern too clean to be dismissed as mistake. She returned to the floor, with her face composed. Professionals move. They do not falter. But every tray she carried, every plate she set down, her hand brushed the key at her chest like a talisman. Victor ate slowly tonight, not because he savored, but because he watched. He watched Grace, the staff, the manager, the rhythm of the room. And halfway through his ribeye, he leaned back, dabbed his mouth with the napkin, and said, "You know, I've been thinking. You're wasted here. You should be running this place, not serving." "Running it would mean becoming what I'm fighting," she said. "And what's that?" "People who think they own it." His laughter carried across 2 tables. Diners glanced over, smiled politely, looked away. But his eyes sharpened. "Be careful," he said softly. "There are owners in every room. Sometimes you don't even know who they are until they decide you're finished." Grace smiled, thin as glass. "Then I'll make sure I finish first." When service ended and the last guest drifted out, Bryce gathered the books again. "I'll do deposits," he said, too smooth. Grace held out her hand. "I'll reconcile first." He froze. A small moment. But in that freeze lived everything. Control. Fear. Exposure. He glanced at Victor, who still lingered near the bar, swirling his drink, as if he owned the clock. "Fine," Bryce said finally. "Knock yourself out." She opened the books at the counter. Page by page, receipt by receipt, she compared. Several carried the same faint surcharge. Others had been altered, tips erased, numbers inflated. She circled each in red pen. Her notebook grew thicker. When she closed the last one, Victor spoke from across the room. "Well?" "Well," she said, tucking her notes away, "I think tomorrow will be interesting." Victor raised his glass. "Tomorrow always is." The city woke differently when you had secrets in your pocket. Grace could feel it on her walk to work the next morning. The rhythm of crosswalks, the hiss of buses, the bite of coffee brewed too long. She carried more than an apron rolled in her tote. She carried the folded ledger slips, the photos of doctored receipts, and the micro SD card whose contents she hadn't dared look at yet. Evidence. Not guesses, not suspicions. Evidence that lived like dynamite, silent until struck. She knew better than to underestimate Bryce. Men like him lived off charm the way sharks live off motion stop moving, stop smiling. And they drown. But beneath the practiced grin was calculation. And calculation meant contingency plans. She needed to be ahead of him. At 9:15 a.m., as she ducked into the public library 2 blocks away, climbed the stairs to the computer lab, and slipped the micro SD card into the side of a terminal. The screen blinked. Folder names scrolled into view. 7/12, 7/19, 7/26. Weeks. Each folder contained hours of video, all from the camera over the bar. She clicked. The footage was mundane until it wasn't. Bartenders pouring drinks, checks being run. Then Bryce, slipping behind the counter when the staff were busy, lifting checks, swapping them, sliding new ones into the books. His hands were fast, but not invisible. Each swap left a fingerprint of gray text, a ghost surcharge, a forged adjustment. Each move dated and time-stamped. Her pulse thudded. This wasn't just sloppy skimming. It was systemic. A manager laundering comps for high rollers, like Hallett, by stealing from everyone else. And the worst part, the part that chilled her, was how casual it looked. Bryce didn't act like a man committing theft. He acted like a man performing routine maintenance, changing a light bulb. She pulled out her phone, snapped photos of the screen. Backup to the backup. Paper trails can burn, data trails can be erased. But once you scatter pieces into enough places, truth becomes stubborn. When she left the library, the city felt louder. Sirens ricocheted off glass. Children squealed near a fountain. A saxophone on the corner carved the air into raw brass. She walked faster. Noon wasn't just a time now. It was a countdown. Victor Hallett returned that evening again, right on schedule, the way comets return to skies they believe they own. He ordered the martini, the scallops, the ribeye. Same script, same confidence. But tonight, his eyes didn't wander the room. They stayed locked on Grace. She felt it while pouring water at table 6, while adjusting candles at table 11. He wasn't watching her like a man watches a waitress. He was watching her like a man calculates risk. When she delivered his steak, he leaned close. "You found something, didn't you?" Her body didn't flinch. "I found the ribeye medium rare," she said calmly. His grin was slow. "I admire you, Grace. Truly, most people would fold under Bryce. You don't. That tells me 2 things. 1, you're stubborn. 2, you don't understand how dangerous stubborn can be." "And you do?" she asked. "I own stubborn," he said. "I built an empire on it, but I also learned when to buy it, when to break it, when to bury it." She straightened. "Then you should know. I don't sell." Mini reveal number 8 arrived half an hour later when Iris, behind the bar, slipped Grace a folded napkin. Inside was a single receipt, torn from the printer before it could be altered. On it, scrawled in Bryce's unmistakable handwriting, "Service Adge, $1,500. The line had been crossed out hastily, replaced with a new total. "He dropped it by mistake," Iris whispered. "Didn't want you to see. Figured you should." Grace tucked it into her notebook. Another shard of glass in the mirror. The picture sharpened. Bryce was manufacturing service adjustments, pocketing them, then rewriting totals. Guests rarely checked closely. Staff rarely questioned authority. A perfect theft hiding in plain sight, but not perfect enough. That night, after closing, Bryce cornered her by the dish pit, his smile brittle. "I know what you're doing." She wiped her hands on a towel, met his eyes. "I'm working." "What are you doing?" "Collecting mistakes," he said. "And you've made plenty, snooping in books, asking questions, talking to staff behind my back. You think you're clever, but you're not. You're replaceable." "Maybe," she said, "but evidence isn't." His expression froze. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes before the grin returned. "What evidence?" "The kind that doesn't go away just because you smirk at it," she said. For a moment, the dish pit seemed smaller, the clang of plates louder, the smell of bleach sharper. Bryce leaned close, dropped his voice to a knife's edge. "You don't understand how far this goes. You think it's just me? You think Hallett doesn't know? He's the reason we comp. He's the reason we skim. He's the reason this restaurant exists at all. Without him, There's no room to serve in? Grace's chest tightened. Victor wasn't just a guest exploiting privilege. He was underwriting the whole system. The comps weren't favors. They were currency, a laundering of loyalty. Bryce skimmed from the weak to pay for the strong. And Victor knew. She walked home, with the city pounding around her, the ledger papers pressed tight against her ribs. The brass key at her chest seemed to burn now, a reminder that there was always a door someone else couldn't open. She had to choose: send the evidence now, or wait for the right moment. Sleep didn't come. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, papers spread like a battlefield, the hum of the laundromat below like a war drum. She saw the path clearly now. Catalyst, investigation, showdown. The pattern in stories was the same as the pattern in life. What mattered was whether you had the courage to follow it through. The showdown began the next night. The room was full Friday crowds, couples dressed to impress, corporate tables flexing expense accounts. Victor arrived again. And this time, Bryce practically bowed at the door. Grace moved through the room like water, calm, steady. But inside, her veins buzzed. She carried the receipts, the ledger slips, the SD card in her apron. She had emailed copies to herself, to Iris, even to the anonymous city investigator whose address still glowed in her drafts. The evidence lived in too many places, now to be killed. At 9:00, the couple at table 4 asked for their check. Grace printed it, handed it over. She lingered just long enough to see the faint gray surcharge at the bottom again. Her throat tightened. She took the book back, walked straight to Victor's table, and laid the receipt down beside his martini glass. "See that?" she said quietly. He glanced down, then up. $3. What of it? "It's theft," she said. "From them. From everyone. And it balances the books, so you don't have to." His grin faltered. "Careful, Grace." She leaned closer. "No, you be careful. Because tonight, I'm done letting you think you own the room." Mini reveal number 9 unfolded like choreography. Bryce appeared at her shoulder, too quick. "Everything okay here?" Grace turned, held up the receipt. "Another surcharge, another theft, and I've got weeks of them." Bryce's face darkened. "Grace, you're tired. You're seeing ghosts in numbers." "No," she said. "I'm seeing patterns. And so will the city." Gasps rippled from the nearby tables. Diners leaned in. Phones tilted. The room itself became a witness. Victor stood slowly, napkin falling from his lap. "This is not how you want to do this," he said, voice low, dangerous. "It's exactly how I want to do this," Grace said. She reached into her apron, pulled the notebook, and laid it open on the table between them. Photos, receipts, signatures, adjustments, all lined up like soldiers. "This is your generosity," she said. "Stealing from those who can't fight back to feed those who don't need it." Bryce reached for the notebook. She snapped it shut. "Touch it, and I call the police right now." The room held its breath. Even the chandeliers seemed to pause. Victor's eyes narrowed. He looked at her, not with amusement now, but calculation. "What do you want?" "The truth," she said. And the bill, paid, like everyone else's. The silence that followed her words was the kind that bends a room. It wasn't empty. It was charged, like static before lightning. Diners froze with forks halfway to mouths, phones tilted higher, the little red dots of recording lights blinking like watchful eyes. Even the kitchen staff leaned through the pass window, spatulas still in hand. Bryce recovered first. His voice was smooth, but pitched too high, like a violin string wound too tight. Folks, nothing to see here. Just a minor misunderstanding about procedure. Our waitress is a little enthusiastic. He tried to laugh. It skittered across the floor and died. Grace didn't flinch. She laid another receipt on the table one with the faint gray surcharge, then another, then another. 3 for 4, 5. Each landed like a drumbeat. Enthusiasm doesn't forge signatures. Enthusiasm doesn't install hidden fees. Theft does. Murmurs rippled through the room. A man at table 7 lifted his own bill, squinted, and whispered to his date, "Ours has it too." Another guest began scrolling through her banking app, frown deepening. The atmosphere shifted, suspicion spreading like smoke. Victor stepped forward, commanding. His presence had always been gravitational, and he deployed it now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice warm and heavy with confidence, "let's not let rumors spoil a fine evening. I assure you, any discrepancies will be corrected immediately. Drinks on me to make amends." That would have worked on another night, in another room. But not tonight. Tonight, there was evidence stacked on linen, filmed by phones, reinforced by a woman who refused to bend. "Apologies don't erase patterns," Grace said. "And generosity doesn't erase theft." Bryce snapped. The mask tore clean. He leaned close, hissed so only the nearby tables could hear, but nearby was enough. "You don't know who you're messing with. Shut your mouth before you regret it." Her hand went to the brass key at her chest. She held his gaze. "The only thing I regret is not calling this out sooner." Mini reveal 10 came not from her, but from the room itself. A diner in a gray suit stood. Phone raised. "I've got 2 years in financial compliance. That surcharge is illegal here. I've got it on video." Another voice chimed in. "Same on mine. Look." She held her phone up. The surcharge glowed faintly on her screen. The crowd wasn't passive anymore. They were witnesses, participants. The dining room had become a tribunal. Bryce's smile curdled. He turned to Victor, silent plea in his eyes. Victor lifted his glass, swallowed the rest of his martini in one clean tilt, and set it down like a gavel. "Enough," he said. His voice was lower now, iron under velvet. "Grace, tell me exactly what you want. Name your price." Her throat tightened. This was the pivot, the moment where power tried to buy silence. She thought of her rent, her student loans, the stack of unpaid medical bills from her mother's last hospital stay. A number leapt unbidden into her mind. Enough to fix everything. Enough to start over. But then she looked at the faces around her. The busser, Marcos watching from the doorway, Iris frozen behind the bar, diners waiting for her answer. If she took the money, the system lived. If she refused, maybe the system cracked. "I want the law," she said simply. The sirens arrived 15 minutes later. Someone, maybe the man in the gray suit, maybe one of the guests already recording, had called the city fraud hotline. 2 uniformed officers stepped into Hearth and Harbor, radios hissing, hands steady on their belts. Behind them came a woman in plain clothes, carrying a leather satchel. Her badge flipped open briefly. Department of Consumer Protection. "Evening," she said briskly. "We've had reports of unauthorized surcharges and doctored receipts. Who's the manager on duty?" Every head swiveled. Bryce raised his hand slowly. His smile had returned, but it was brittle, glass ready to shatter. "I can explain everything." Grace stepped forward, notebook in hand. "No need. It's all here." She opened it. Pages of receipts, photos, timestamps spilling under the officer's flashlight. She held out the micro SD card. "And the video to prove it." The investigator took them without a word, slid them into evidence bags. Bryce stammered, tried to interrupt, but his words tangled into noise. Victor cleared his throat, attempting gravitas. "Let's be reasonable. This is a misunderstanding. I'll cover any discrepancies. No need to escalate." The investigator cut him off with a glance so sharp it might as well have been a blade. "Sir, if you're involved, you'll have your chance to speak. For now, step back." The words hit like a slap. For the first time, Victor Hallett looked diminished. Not ruined, not defeated, but smaller. Like gravity had shifted away from him. The officers escorted Bryce to the office. The crowd buzzed with nervous energy, diners whispering, filming, narrating. Grace stood still in the center, adrenaline making her limbs tremble, the key warm against her skin. Victor lingered, watching her. His smile was gone. In its place was something colder. Calculation, maybe even respect, though twisted. "You've made enemies tonight," he murmured when the investigator moved out of earshot. "Dangerous ones." "And you've made a mistake," she replied. "You thought owning the room meant no one else mattered. But tonight, everyone mattered." His eyes narrowed. "You think this ends here? A few receipts, some cops, and it all collapses? I've built systems stronger than this. I'll walk away untouched." She leaned closer. "Maybe, but not invisible. Not anymore." Mini reveal number 11 arrived in the form of Iris, who had been silent until now. She stepped out from behind the bar, voice steady. "I've been keeping copies, too," she said, pulling a folder from under the counter. She laid it beside Grace's notebook. "Weeks' worth. You're not alone." But gasps swept the room again. The investigator glanced at the folder, nodded once. The pile of evidence grew heavier, undeniable. For the first time, Victor stepped back, just half a step, but it was visible. The man who thought he owned the room was losing his claim, inch by inch, witness by witness. The officers emerged from the office, Bryce between them, hands behind his back. His smile was gone, replaced with a pale mask of fury and fear. Diners lifted phones higher, flashes sparking. The spectacle was complete. "This is outrageous," Bryce barked as they led him toward the door. "Do you know who funds this place? Do you know who I answer to?" Grace's voice cut through, clear and calm. "Tonight, you answer to the law, like everyone else." The officers pushed the door open. Bryce vanished into flashing lights. The crowd exhaled all at once, a sound like waves breaking. Victor lingered. He didn't run, didn't argue, just studied her. "You've won this round," he said quietly. "But don't fool yourself. Systems don't reform overnight. They bend. They adapt. And they remember the people who challenged them." Grace's fingers brushed the key again. "Good," she said. "Let them remember. That's how change starts." He held her gaze another moment, then turned and left, his polished shoes clicking against the tile, the sound hollow where once it had been commanding. The room erupted. Diners clapped. Some cheered. Staff crowded around Grace Marcos, Iris, even the dishwasher still in his apron. For the first time in years, the room didn't feel like a stage built for the rich. It felt like a place where truth had been spoken and heard. The investigator packed the evidence, handed Grace a card. "We'll need statements. Might get messy. But you did the right thing." Grace nodded, exhausted, adrenaline draining. "Messy's fine, as long as it's fair." She stepped into the night air, cool wind hitting her face. For once, the city didn't feel indifferent. It felt alive, as if the skyline itself had leaned down to witness and approve. The brass key glinted in the streetlight. She held it tight, whispering to herself the words her mother had once said. "This opens the only door that matters." Tonight, she had found that door, and she had walked through. The thumbnails alone were a theater of contrast. Grace, hair pulled back, steady eyes. Bryce in handcuffs, red-faced. Victor Hallett caught mid-turn, his expression unreadable. The story traveled from local blogs to national feeds within 24 hours. By Sunday, late-night hosts were cracking jokes. "Imagine being so rich you can buy politicians, but not so rich you can stiff a waitress on a bill." The audience laughed. The clip went viral. Grace didn't laugh. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, phone buzzing every few minutes, with another notification, another message request from a stranger. Some called her a hero. Others called her reckless. Some asked for interviews. Some asked for dates. A few threatened her. She ignored them all, except one, a text from Iris. "We've got your back. Staff meeting Monday. Come." When she returned to the restaurant on Monday morning, the air felt different. No velvet hush, no aura of intimidation. Just staff gathering in the dining room, aprons loose, coffee cups in hand. The owner, an older man with thinning hair and a weary posture, stood at the front. He looked like someone who had just learned half his empire was rotting from the inside. "I owe you all an apology," he said. His voice was rough. "Bryce was running a scheme under my nose. I should have caught it. I didn't. And you paid the price." Grace crossed her arms, waiting. Apologies without action were air. The owner continued. "Effective immediately. No more surcharges. Transparent receipts only. And management oversight will come from outside auditors. I've contacted the Department of Consumer Protection directly. We're cooperating. Bryce is out. Permanently." A ripple of relief went through the staff. Marcos exhaled loudly. Iris leaned against the bar, arms crossed, but smiling faintly. Then the owner turned to Grace. "You held this place accountable when I didn't. For that, I owe you more than words. If you want a management position, it's yours." The room murmured. Grace felt dozens of eyes on her. For a moment, temptation pricked the idea of real pay, stability, authority. But she thought of what she had said to Victor. Running it would mean becoming what I'm fighting. She wasn't ready to trade one kind of power for another. No, she said softly, but firmly. I don't want to run it. I just want it fair. The owner nodded, almost grateful. Then, fair it will be. Mini reveal number 12 happened that afternoon when the investigator returned, folder in hand. She gathered the staff privately. The case is strong, she said. Bryce will face charges, fraud, theft, falsifying records. But more important, his little scheme has exposed similar patterns in other restaurants in the group. We're expanding the investigation. It won't stop here. Her eyes landed on Grace. And that's because you didn't fold. Grace felt the weight of the key at her chest again. She nodded once. Victor Hallett, predictably, didn't vanish. Men like him never did. Instead, 2 weeks later, he appeared on the cover of a financial magazine, the headline spinning the narrative. Philanthropist misled by corrupt manager. His PR team painted him as a victim, a man too generous for his own good. The spin fooled some, but not all. Beneath every article, comments piled up. Wasn't he at the table when it happened? Funny how millionaires always claim ignorance until they're caught. Grace read those comments late at night, not for validation, but for proof that the world was less gullible than it used to be. Systems adapt, yes, but so do people. A month passed. Hearth and Harbor survived, though its clientele shifted. Fewer tycoons demanding corners, more families celebrating milestones, more couples on modest dates. The room felt lighter. Laughter sounded real, not rehearsed. The chandeliers sparkled honestly, as if relieved of their burden of pretense. Grace still served, still rolled silverware, still carried plates with the precision of ritual. But the staff noticed something. Guests treated her differently. Some recognized her from the story, thanked her. Others just seemed to sense the steadiness in her, the quiet refusal to bend. Victor never returned. His absence was a presence in itself, a shadow cut out of the room. But sometimes, Grace caught sight of black SUVs idling on the street, tinted windows reflecting her back at herself. She didn't scare. She had said as much, and she meant it. One night, as the shift wound down, Iris poured her a drink, a martini. Dry, olives on a pick. "To you," she said, sliding it across. Grace lifted it, smiling faintly. "To fairness." Marcos clinked his soda glass against hers. "And to managers who get perp walked instead of pay raises." The staff laughed, tension breaking into warmth. Grace drank. The gin burned clean, sharp, alive. She set the glass down and felt the key heavy against her chest. "This opens the only door that matters," her mother's voice echoed again. And Grace finally understood. Maybe the door wasn't literal. Maybe it was the door between silence and truth, fear and courage, power and fairness. And she had walked through it. The final reveal. Mini reveal, 113, came not in drama, but in something quieter. A letter arrived at her apartment one morning, plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed words. Not everyone hates what you did. Some of us needed it. Keep going. And a friend you don't see. Tucked inside the fold was a check. Not huge, not extravagant, but enough to cover her mother's medical debt in full. Grace stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to cry or laugh. She tucked it into her notebook, beside the receipts, the photos, the evidence of what had been wrong, proof of what she had fought, and proof of what she had won. On her next shift, a guest asked if she was the Grace from the video. She smiled politely. "I'm just the Grace who will bring your dinner," she said. Because that was the point. She wasn't a hero or a headline. She was a woman who refused to let the powerful rewrite the rules. When she walked back through the dining room, trays balanced steady, she felt the weight of the key warm against her skin. And for the first time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like freedom.